Derek Harper, 71, and careful in the way old mechanics are careful, sat at a white-clothed table in a bright brunch place off Magazine Street, where ceiling fans turned slow and the smell of butter and coffee hung in the air. And he held his mug with both hands, as if warmth were a small agreement he could still count on. His wife, Lorna, in a pale jacket that made her look like she was on her way to a fundraiser, lifted her mimosa and said in a voice light enough to pass for a joke, "If it wasn't for pity, no one would have invited you." And the words landed not like a slap, but like a stamp, neat and official, something placed where everyone could see, but no one would claim. Her sister May watched the bubbles climb her glass and did not look at him. And his son Tyler let out a breath that could have been a laugh or a cough, and then bent his head to his phone as if there were a message there, only he could save. Derek did what he had learned to do. He smiled a small smile and took a slow sip, and inside he did a different kind of work. The kind a man does when he knows a bolt has been cross-threaded for years and decides not to fight the metal anymore, but to replace the part. The waiter set down plates with names Derek did not need, something with hollandaise, something with chives, and asked, "Separate or together?" And Lorna said, "Put it on the family card," in the same tone she used to request napkins. And Derek watched the receipt when it came, because paper did not lie, and the numbers were only numbers, but behind them he saw the cabin at Cattle Lake. Boards he had sanded, shingles he had nailed in a storm, with water running down his sleeves, the electric bill he had paid the winter his back ached, the insurance he had renewed when a hailstorm chewed the roof. And all the time someone texted him, "Could you handle this, just for now?" And "I'll pay you back next week." And how next week had become a kind of season that never arrived. He did not argue when Tyler asked if he could fill the tank on the way out of town. He only nodded and kept that small smile steady. And when they stood to leave, Lorna brushed the air near his cheek, as if a kiss had been exchanged, and said, "Don't forget May's thing tonight." And May said, "We'll swing by your place to grab the cooler." And Tyler said, "I'll send you the hotel confirmation, Dad. I used the card to lock the rate." And the three of them moved like a set he had watched many times, each step practiced, each line memorized, so that if he closed his eyes, he could still see who stood where and how they would look through him when they spoke. He walked behind them into the heat, feeling his shirt cling at the back, and thought about how New Orleans was a place people came to forget, and how he had made a habit of remembering receipts, dates, the way the cabin air smelled like pine and dust. The day his name alone went on the deed because he was the only one the bank would trust. The day his hand shook a little when he signed because he knew what he was taking on and did it anyway. The drive back west was long and flat, bridges over water and billboards for exit food, and Derek allowed the radio to murmur a station that played songs he remembered from the 70s. Not because the words mattered, but because the steady beat kept him from thinking too fast. And in the passenger seat, Lorna scrolled through a cart of skin creams and shoes and said now and then, "We'll order tonight," and "Don't be difficult," and "Tyler needs the card for Vegas business networking, you know how it is." And he said all right. The way a man says it, when he has learned that quiet is sometimes the only tool that still fits the screw. At home in Houston, the air tasted like dust and heat, and the little house greeted him with its honest order. Hat on the hook, keys in the blue bowl, bills in a neat stack. And he put water on for coffee, though he did not need caffeine. He needed the sound of a kettle and the steam on his knuckles to mark a line between the world out there and the room where he could still decide. He sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote the date, and then 3 words: account, cabin, lawyer, each letter squared. And while the kettle hissed, he opened a drawer and took out a folder that had grown fat over the years, statements and notices and contractor estimates, and he placed them in a row like tools on a bench, because when a thing is laid out, it stops being a shadow and becomes a shape you can measure. Lorna called from the bedroom. "We need to be at May's by 6. Don't wear that old jacket." And he said, "All right," and penciled a box next to account and thought about the list of authorized users he could recite without a screen in front of him. Lorna, of course. May, who said her card was for emergencies, which had come to mean dresses that shipped in soft tissue paper. Tyler, who said business dinners and posted photos of glowing bars that did not look like business at all. And he saw the autopays stacked like shingles, the condo utilities that were not his, the lawn service at the cabin, the streaming packages, the club dues. And he pictured a cursor on a web page asking him, "Are you sure you want to revoke?" And felt the answer rise like something he had been storing in a pocket for years. He drank his coffee, a little too hot, and the heat on his tongue was a small honest pain he did not mind. And he stood and walked to the spare room and put his hand on the back of the chair where his old laptop waited. And he did not sit down yet, because a man should not rush the moment when he changes a thing he has tolerated for too long. He should arrive at it with both feet. So he walked the house once, checking that the back door latch still needed oil, that the porch light flickered, that the sprinkler coupler wept a thin line of water, noting each small fix like a promise to himself that not everything needed to be heavy to prove it mattered. The sun slid along the linoleum in a bright rectangle, and dust moved like slow rain in the beam. And he thought of the cabin windows at 5 in the afternoon, when the lake threw light into the room and made the table glow. And he thought of a boy with skinny elbows holding a too small fish and grinning so hard the picture blurred. And he set that memory down the way you set a photograph in a box, not to lose it, but to keep it safe from fingerprints. Then he went back to the spare room, sat and opened the laptop, and the screen came up blue and ordinary, and the password keys felt the same as always under his fingers. But the air around the chair felt different, lighter in a way most people would not notice. And he rested his hands a moment on the edge of the desk and listened to the old fan begin its thin whir. And in that quiet, the plan that had formed at the brunch table settled into place without drama. Tonight, he would do the small, clean work a man does when he is done being the last person the bill lands on, and whatever names other people used for it, selfish, cold, dramatic, would be like weather moving over a roof he had just repaired, noise, not damage. The cursor blinked on the bank login, steady as a heartbeat, and he lifted his hands and began to type. Derek waited for the laptop to stop humming, then typed his bank username the way he always did, slow and exact. And when the dashboard opened, he felt that small click in his chest that told him the machine understood. He moved the mouse to the joint credit account, and the list came up like a tidy shelf in a garage. Current balance, available credit, authorized users, autopays. Nothing dramatic, just rows, but every row was a story he knew by heart. He reached for the yellow pad beside the keyboard and drew a small square next to account, then clicked Manage Users. And the screen asked, "Are you sure you want to revoke access for Lorna H?" And he answered in a quiet voice no one else could hear, "Yes," and pressed confirm, then watched her card flip from green to gray. He did not feel cruel. He felt careful. The way he felt when he tightened a loose hinge and tested it twice. The next name was May R., labeled emergency card, and he opened the autopay list tied to her number. 2 dress subscriptions, a wine club, a flower delivery, and canceled each one, reading the warnings that popped up like small yellow flags. This will affect future deliveries. He clicked through them, steady, and then removed May's card too. Tyler H. showed last, marked business, with club dues, meal charges at late-night places that called themselves steakhouses but looked like bars in the photos, and a gym that cost more than Derek's first car payment. He clicked disable, felt the same question rise, "Are you sure?" and said yes again, then read the page back to himself like a checklist. 3 users removed, no active cards except his, no autopays except his phone bill. He took a pen and wrote a neat tick in the square beside account, then opened a folder icon labeled cabin and scrolled the PDF copies, deed with his name alone, tax receipts, roof estimates, the old letter from the bank clerk, thanking him for catching up the note during the bad winter years. Proof that the place people called ours had rested on his shoulders for so long he had stopped feeling the weight. He drafted an email to Jared, the lawyer whose business card he kept paper-clipped to the folder. Subject line, "Ready now," and attached the documents one by one, double-checking each file name before he hit send. In the body, he wrote in short lines, like instructions, Please proceed with private listing. No family notification. Cash buyer preferred. I will box personal items Friday morning. Call only if urgent. He sent it and waited until the message sent bar slid away, then opened a simple text file called Notes and typed a packing list. 2 plastic totes, brown paper, tape, gloves, screwdriver set, small pry bar for the ancient window latch, trash bags, thermos, broom, and printed it for the fridge. He stood, walked to the kitchen, and taped the list next to the calendar where Lorna wrote her events in large loops. Under Friday, he drew a small square and shaded it in, a mark that meant his time would not be available for errands or detours. Back at the desk, he logged into the utilities portal for the cabin and scheduled final reads for electric and water for the end of the month, then canceled the lawn service with a polite note. Property will transfer ownership. Thank you for your years of work. He saved the confirmations as PDFs, named them with today's date, and placed them in the cabin folder, then opened the password manager and changed the bank password to a long string he wrote down once and folded into his wallet. He set 2-factor on email and smiled at the small blue checkmark that told him no one could force their way back through a password they guessed from birthdays and pet names. A soft thump from the bedroom told him Lorna had kicked off her shoes. Her voice floated down the hall. "Did you order the serum?" And he answered, "No," plain as a level laid on a board. And when she made that small offended sound he had heard for years, he did not explain. He did not smooth it. He simply listened to the house settle. He returned to the yellow pad and drew 3 more boxes. Email lawyer, cancel autopays, change passwords, then filled them in with slow, even strokes. The next thing he did was open the family group thread, not to post, just to look, and he scrolled past last summer's photos. Lorna on the deck at Cattle Lake, May with a tray of ribs, Tyler in sunglasses holding up a bottle. And the speech bubbles that followed. Put it on the card, and you're the best dad. And quick question reinsurance, can you handle? And he saw how many times he had answered without being seen, a ghost hand keeping the lights on. He typed a draft. All shared accounts are closed, all future costs your own, and sat with it 5 seconds, then deleted it, because silence would force the message to arrive the honest way, through the first declined charge and the first quiet weekend with no mower. He opened a new document titled Letter to Myself and wrote in plain sentences, "I pay what I choose. I do not pay to keep peace. No more debts called love. Boundaries are ordinary, not cruel." He printed it and slid it behind his driver's license so he would touch it every time he reached for his ID. He went room to room with a small box and collected spare keys that tied him to routines that were not his anymore. The extra cabin key from the dish by the back door, the storage unit key for May's seasonal decorations he always ended up hauling, the backup condo key Lorna had pressed into his hand in case of delivery issues. And he labeled the lid Return, set it by the door, and felt a space open inside his chest like a shelf cleared for something useful. He checked the truck in the carport. Tires aired, straps coiled, moving blankets folded, a broom wedged under the toolbox. He filled a thermos with water and set it in the fridge for Friday. When he came back in, the house felt different, not empty, not full, just lined up. He wiped the kitchen counter with slow circles, put the kettle on, and when the water started to sing, he poured it over a tea bag and watched the color bloom. He sat at the table, the steam on his face, and thought about one more thing he could do that was quiet but strong. He opened a new bank account in his name only, moved a clean sum into it, and set his pension deposit to land there next month. He left the old checking account active for the mortgage payment alone, then put a reminder on his calendar to transfer that as well after closing on the cabin. He closed the laptop and listened to the house, the clock tick, the refrigerator hum, a branch tapping the eave. At 9:30, he took a short walk down the block, the summer air thick, a train horn low and far, a dog somewhere giving one warning bark and then stopping. He felt the shape of what he had done settle into him, not like guilt, not like pride, more like the feeling after you torque a bolt to spec, and the tool tells you with a small click that it's right. Back home, he set the alarm, turned off lights one by one, paused at the spare room, and looked at the dark screen as if it were a quiet witness. Then went to the bedroom. Lorna was already faced away, blue glow on her cheek from the tablet. "Be ready for 6 tomorrow," she said, and he said, "I won't make it tomorrow," in the same even tone he had used with the pop-up questions. And when she said, "What's that supposed to mean?" he replied, "It means I have work at the cabin," then turned his pillow over to the cool side and lay on his back. He counted his breaths to 10 and back to 1, a habit that had helped him through storms on roofs and nights in hospitals when he sat with friends. He slept, and when he woke once at 2, he did not pick up the phone on the nightstand to check anything. He only listened to the AC cycle and told himself the same simple thing. The work is done for tonight. The rest belongs to morning. At 6, the alarm chirped, and he turned it off fast so it would not startle her. And he stood in the doorway a moment and looked at the small life he kept neat. Hat on the hook, keys in the bowl, list on the fridge, box by the door. And he felt something like a mystery resolving, not with a bang but with a click. He brewed coffee, wrote Friday, cabin in block letters on the calendar even bigger, and drew a line under the 3 words on the pad. Account, cabin, lawyer, as the sun found the edge of the kitchen window and climbed it inch by inch. Derek woke before sunrise on Friday and moved through the house in a quiet rhythm that felt like muscle memory, filling the thermos, folding 2 moving blankets, checking that the tape gun had a new roll, then loading the truck bed with the plastic totes, the broom, the little pry bar, the screwdriver set, and a box of brown paper. He wrote cabin on an index card in thick marker and slid it under the elastic band on the dashboard like a small compass pointing the way. Then locked the front door twice and stood for a second with his palm on the wood, not sentimental, just making sure the latch caught the way he liked it to, and got on the road as the sky went from deep blue to a thin, pale gray. The highway out of Houston was already awake. Delivery trucks shouldering past, a few early cars floating in that half light, and Derek kept to the center lane, steady, the engine a low comfort, coffee warm in his hand at a stoplight near a gas station where the first customers shuffled inside. He did not play the radio this time because he wanted to hear the truck, wanted to hear if anything rattled that shouldn't, and the silence let his thoughts line up without rushing. Keys in pocket, deed in glove box, 2 showings scheduled at 10 and noon, utilities final read ordered, mower cord oiled last week. The turnoff to Cattle Lake came sooner than he expected, and he felt a small pull in his chest, the way a man does when his body remembers distances better than his mind. And he took the 2-lane road slow, noticing the ditch grass, the paint peeling off the old bait shop sign, the way fog sat low over the water where the road briefly skimmed the shoreline. The gravel driveway to the cabin sounded like always under his tires, a polite crunch. And when he parked, he sat a moment and looked at the porch. Boards he had set, railing he had replaced. And then he noticed 2 things that did not fit. A different tire track curved out from the shed, fresh tread over older gravel, and the new padlock on the shed door was the short, brass kind he never used. He didn't feel angry, he felt curious. And curiosity in him always took the shape of steps. So he unlocked the cabin first, windows fogged from the cool night, and walked through the rooms to open the curtains. The air inside carrying pine and last summer's charcoal. The main table still had 4 coasters set in a neat square from the last time he cleaned, but on the counter lay a crumpled receipt from a liquor store 40 miles away, date stamped 3 days ago, and in the sink a lime half had dried out like a paper cuff. He stood with his hands on the back of a chair and thought about keys. How many spares had he handed out with promises of just for this weekend? And how many had never been returned? And then he turned on the tap to make sure the water still ran, and it did, steady and clear, another small check on his list. He started the work he had come to do because the calendar did not care who visited. And he boxed the picture frames one by one, wrapping each in brown paper. The tape pulling off the roll with that soft rip he'd always liked, and he stacked the frames in a tote labeled Keep, and made another tote for the loose things that mattered only to him. An old pocket knife, the first boat keys, a tape measure with a cracked casing he trusted more than the shiny one he kept in town. Every so often, he glanced at the doorway to the porch, listening for a car, Not because he expected one, but because he was used to being interrupted here by other people's plans. At 9:15, the phone in his pocket buzzed, and when he pulled it out, Tyler glowed across the screen. The photo of his son at 26 in a tux still attached to the contact, and Derek felt the small draw of history, the way a name could tug at you. But he set the phone face down on the table and went back to wrapping frames. And 30, a text arrived from Jared, arriving at 9:45 with photographer. And Derek replied with a simple okay, then carried the first tote to the truck and slid it against the cab. On his way back, he detoured to the shed and tried the odd padlock, tested its weight, looked for scratches that might tell a story. It wasn't a lock he owned, and the chain was cinched one link tighter than he ever pulled it. And for a second, he saw Tyler's friend Seth, the one with the big truck and bigger ideas, grinning on the deck last summer, saying, "We could store the jet skis here over winter. Easy." And he had said no at the time, but had not changed the lock. And now he got the little pry bar from the truck and slid it under the hasp to check the screws. Someone had put cheap screws in soft wood, and the hasp lifted with a squeak, and he took the lock off and pocketed it, not to keep, just to show later if anyone asked how it looked. And when he swung the shed doors open, he found 2 folding chairs, an old propane tank, his mower where he left it, and one new thing, a plastic storage bin with a tape label that said party in a rushed hand that looked like Tyler's on bad days. He did not open the bin because it did not matter what sat inside, cups or sparklers or nothing at all. The point was that people had used a space he paid for, like it was theirs without telling him. And the mystery in that was not who did it, but how many times he had let it slide because he did not want to be the difficult one. He refastened the hasp with 2 proper screws from his kit and replaced the lock with his own, the heavy iron one that clicked shut with a convincing sound, then pulled the mower out and set it aside in case the photographer wanted clean edges near the steps. At 9:45, a small SUV rolled up and a woman climbed out with a camera bag and a clipboard, and Jared followed in a gray sedan, tie removed, sleeves rolled, and he shook Derek's hand in that solid way that said, "I remember you, and I'm here to finish the job." The photographer moved around the rooms with quiet steps, asking if she could remove a throw blanket, angling herself to catch the light. And Derek stayed out of her way, carrying the second tote to the truck, packing the drawer tools in a small caddy, wiping a ring off the coffee table with his shirt cuff. At 10:10, the phone buzzed again and then again, and when he checked it, there were 3 missed calls from Tyler and a text from Lorna. Auto pay off? This is petty. And he put the phone back in his pocket without answering because he had decided the first replies would not come from him, but from the systems they had leaned on like furniture. Noon's showing needed a tidy porch, so he swept the deck, pushed a spider web off the upper corner, knocked mud from the doormat with 2 firm shakes. And when he looked up, he saw the lake through the trees, flat and gray-green, with a small breeze making the kind of ripples that broke clean against the shore. He felt that old pull in his chest again and set it down carefully, like a tool you might need later but not now. Jared came to him with a small smile and said, "We'll have 2 good offers by Monday, maybe sooner." And Derek nodded and said, "Proceed with the cleanest one." And Jared said, "You sure you don't want me to handle family communication?" And Derek said, "No communication until papers are signed." And they agreed without fuss. When the photographer packed up, she thanked Derek for the tidy spaces. "Makes the light red honest," she said. And the phrase stayed with him because honest was what he wanted. Not a fight, not a grand speech, just the plain truth laid out. After they left, he ate a sandwich at the table and wrote a short list on a scrap. Change cabin lock. Done. Return spare keys. Next week. Cancel trash pickup. Call Monday. And at 1 o'clock, he locked the door, tested the handle twice, and walked to the water. The phone vibrated in his pocket again, a call he knew by rhythm before he looked, and he held it in his hand until the screen went black and the sound stopped. Not to be cruel, but because picking up would strip the day of its clean edges and drop him back into a script where he played the man who fixes what other people break. On the drive out, he noticed the padlock in his pocket and put it in the glove box beside the deed copy and the small Polaroid of him and a skinny boy with two tiny fish. And he thought briefly about how many locks in his life had looked secure but weren't. How many were placed for show? And he told himself he would check the locks that mattered twice from now on. The tires hummed on the highway home, and the truck felt sure under him. And he let the afternoon light sit on his forearms through the open window, warm and simple. And when the phone buzzed once more, he let it be and watched the road unwind in front of him like a long, straight truth that did not need anyone's permission to be followed. Derek reached home before the sun slipped behind the houses and carried the two empty totes inside, stacked them by the hall closet, and put the truck keys in the blue bowl like always. The house met him with its small, honest sounds. The clock tick, the AC turning over, a neighbor's screen door bumping shut. And he stood a moment in the doorway, feeling how the day at the lake had made a space in him, wide and clean, like a workbench after you sweep off sawdust. He brewed coffee he did not need and drank it anyway because warm things steadied his hands, then washed the cup and wiped the counter in slow circles. The phone buzzed once on the table, lit with Tyler and the tuxedo photo, and he watched the light fade without touching it. The sound thin and insect-like in the quiet kitchen. He set the phone face down and wrote a short line on the yellow pad. Cabin. Photos done, lock changed, 2 showings, and drew a square he would fill when the lawyer called with offers. Then he put the pad away and took a short walk as the street lamps clicked on, the air still hot and holding the day. When he came back, his porch light flickered twice and died, a small problem he could fix with a new bulb, so he made a list, porch bulb, hinge oil coupler, and slept with the window cracked to let in a thin thread of night air. Saturday morning, the phone began again. Early, a steady rhythm every hour, and each time Tyler bloomed across the screen. Derek let the call run its course and end by itself. He trimmed the crepe myrtle. He swept the carport. He pulled the sprinkler coupler and wrapped it with tape until the weeping stopped. At 10, he drove to the hardware store and bought 2 bulbs, a small box of proper screws, and a new latch because he did not like the way the backgate hook had begun to sag. He nodded to the clerk who had been there for years, a man who studied things instead of selling them, and paid with his own card, a habit that felt right in his hand. Back home, he replaced the porch bulb and the light came on true and strong. A plain win he marked with a small nod to no one. The phone lit again as he stood on the step, Tyler once more, then a text that read, "Dad, call me," then another that said, "This is serious," then a third with a photo of a casino lobby he did not recognize. He put the phone in the junk drawer and closed it, not to hide, not to punish, but to keep the day from being pulled in a direction he had already decided against. At noon, the family thread bloomed like a rash. "Lorna, autopay failed for my condo electric. Is the bank having issues?" "May, wine delivery says declined. Error on your end?" "Tyler, my card is saying blocked. Dad, what is going on?" And Derek scrolled once to see the shape of their words, and then closed the thread and opened the back door to let the smell of hot grass in. He fixed the back gate latch with the new hardware and tested it 5 times, listening for that little click when metal found metal just right. A strange car idled in front of his house late afternoon, a gray sedan with its windows up, and sat there long enough to be noticed. Derek stood at the far edge of the blinds and watched it, not moving the slats, wondering if it was a delivery driver lost or someone working up to a knock. And after a full minute, the car pulled away slow, turned the corner, and was gone. The phone rang again at 5, 6, and 7, each call from Tyler separated by a few minutes and a few more words sent as texts. "Mom says you're not well. We can talk like adults. This is petty, Dad." He did not answer any of them. Instead, he cooked rice and pan-fried a piece of fish, squeezed lemon over the top, ate at the table with a glass of water and no TV, and then washed the pan and left it to dry. After dark, he took the phone out of the drawer, set it to Do Not Disturb, and left it face down on the counter where it hummed once more and then went quiet, the silence spreading out across the room like a clean sheet. Sunday, he woke early, sat with coffee and the yellow pad, and filled in the square next to account because the users were removed and the autopays were canceled and the password had been changed. All the little pop-ups answered in his even tone with, "Yes," At 9:30, a new text slid in from a number he did not have saved. Seth? Maybe? It's not cool to cancel stuff without warning, man. And Derek deleted it without opening because some messages were only noise. He took the box labeled return from the hall and set it by the door again, meaning to drop it off later in the week with a note through May's mail slot, meaning to hand Lorna her condo key at a time with witnesses and no stories. He went out to the yard and pulled weeds around the mailbox and found himself thinking about locks. How simple ones bought at a big store kept honest people honest and nothing more. And how the brass lock at the shed had looked like safety but slid loose at the soft screws. The phone rang from inside the house, a muffled vibration behind the door, and then stopped and then started again. He did not hurry. He watered the strip of grass near the sidewalk, rolled the hose, wiped his hands on a rag, and went back in. The phone showed 6 missed calls, all Tyler, and 1 text from Lorna. "This is beneath you. Fix it." He placed the phone face down again and stood at the sink, feeling the part of himself that always used to rush loosen and fall quiet. Around noon, he drove to the grocery store and bought beans, onions, a small bundle of cilantro, and a bag of rice because simple food felt like a plan you could complete. In the parking lot, his phone lit with a call from a local number he didn't know. He let it go and then read the voicemail. This one from the electric company for the cabin, automated, confirming the final rid date he had set. And he smiled a little because machines had a way of telling the truth without edge. On the way home, at a light, he thought about the party bin in the shed with its taped label, the brass lock, the crumpled receipt, and a simple question formed in him like a soft knot. How many people had carried pieces of his life under the story family while he carried the cost under the story duty? It wasn't a question he needed someone to answer. It was one he kept to remind himself that mysteries are sometimes just the parts you never looked at straight. Late afternoon brought a storm that did not last. Wind up, a quick scatter of big drops, sun back. But it dropped a small limb across his side yard, and he sawed it into 3 pieces and stacked them by the bins for pickup. Sweat darkened the back of his shirt, and when he went inside to wash his hands, he saw that the phone had rung 5 more times. All Tyler. And the last text read, "Answer, or I'm coming over." He did not type back. He did not call back. He set the phone on the windowsill and watched a bird pick at his lawn for a minute. Then started a pot of beans with onions and salt and the faintest shake of cumin because it tasted like home to him. Twilight came on soft, and a car rolled to a stop in front of his house again. Not the same sedan as before, this one black, windows up. The engine stayed on. Derek did not go to the door. He turned off the kitchen light and stood where he could see the walkway without being seen, and he waited. In 3 minutes, the car pulled forward, turned at the corner, and left. No knock, no voice, just the engine note fading. In the living room, the wall clock ticked on, folding the day into itself. He ate beans over rice with chopped cilantro, read 3 pages of a library novel, and washed his bowl. When he finally picked up the phone to set the alarm for morning, he saw a last text from Tyler sent at 9:41 p.m. "Dad, please." And he held the phone a second longer than he needed to, not because the word pulled him back, but because it let him see the pattern clear. Every call asked him to return to a role he had left. Every ring tried to tie him to a chain he had already slipped. He put the phone face down and turned off the lamp. In the quiet, he felt a shape settle into place. Not relief, not triumph. Something simpler, like a bolt seated right. His last thought before sleep was plain and steady. Let the phone ring. Let it ring again. He would not pick up. He would never pick up that call that did not ask who he was, but only what he could pay. On Monday morning, Derek woke early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with the yellow pad while the house was still cool. And at 8:07 a.m., Jared's email arrived with the subject line, "Offers. Cattle Lake." He opened it and read slowly, the way he read manuals. 2 offers laid out in clear lines. 1 cash with a short inspection window. 1 financed with more money, but more strings. And he answered in the same even tone he had used all week. Proceed with the clean cash offer if the inspection is clean. No family updates until contracts are signed. Then he printed the timeline Jared attached. Inspection Wednesday, appraisal waived, closing penciled for next week. and he slid the page into a folder he kept neat. After that, he did a different kind of work, the kind he had put off for years, opening a fresh spreadsheet and typing a simple title at the top, Outstanding Family Balances, and he itemized 3 things, not because the sum was large, but because the record mattered. Tyler's Vegas business advance he had covered last winter, ate $1,800. Tyler's last-minute work clothes charge he had swallowed in April, $600. And 2 condo utility payments for Lorna when she said the online portal wouldn't load. $4,000 even, a number he could carry in his head. He typed 1 page that said only what was needed. Outstanding balance, $4,000. Due by July 31st. No extensions. Attached the list. And sent it to Tyler's email with a second copy to Lorna. Plain subject line. Final reminder. When the whoosh of the sent mail faded, he sat with his coffee without moving, listening to the AC fan and the soft tick of the wall clock. And then he stood and washed the cup. The phone buzzed at 8:19 with Tyler on the screen, and again at 8:21 with Lorna, and again at 8:22 with Tyler. And he let all 3 turn to missed calls without touching them. By 9, his bank app pinged with a deposit alert, and he opened it because machines told the truth without edge. $1,000 landed in his account from an account labeled H, family, memo line blank. And a minute later, a text from Tyler arrived. 2 words he had seen before. We're square. Derek stood at the sink with the phone in his palm and felt nothing sharp, only the flat surface of a table that did not wobble anymore, and he did not reply. He printed a short letter on clean paper. Notice, as of today, all shared accounts are closed. I will not be responsible for any debts moving forward. Folded 2 copies and put them with the small box of keys labeled return so he could drop them in mail slots later in the week. At 10, he drove to the post office, bought 2 certified mail stickers because paper with tracking cut down on stories later, and sent copies of the final reminder to Tyler and Lorna even though the email was enough. On his way out, a hardware store truck rumbled past, and for a moment he thought he saw Seth in the passenger seat. Sunglasses, cap pulled low, but the truck moved on and the face was gone. Back home, his phone chimed with a security email from the bank. Sign-in attempt blocked, Las Vegas NV. And he nodded once and set the message in a new folder called Logs. Near noon, he called Jared from the porch to confirm Wednesday's inspection and told him he would swing by the cabin Tuesday to pull the last nails from the wall where the big picture hung so the photographer's patches would sit flat. After lunch, he took the truck out again, this time to the cabin, because he preferred to be early for his own goodbyes. The road was the same and not the same depending on which details he looked at. And when he turned into the gravel drive, the air smelled like warm pine. He unlocked the door, carried in a roll of patching compound and a small putty knife, and filled the nail holes in 3 quick passes. Then wiped the table one more time with a damp cloth. There was a folded note on the floor just inside the door that he was sure had not been there Friday. A scrap from a small notebook, torn at the top, with 5 sharp words in a slanted hand. Call me before you ruin it, followed by a phone number with no name. He did not call the number. He put the note in his pocket and instead checked the shed lock he had replaced. Found it untouched, then walked down the short path to the water where the muddy edge showed faint drag marks like something heavy had been pulled and then lifted. Maybe a canoe he no longer owned or a cooler. He stood there for a minute, listening to insects and the small lap of water against the shore, and felt the old habit of guessing other people's stories tug at him and then loosen. On the way back to the house, he saw a glint near the porch steps and found a key on a ring with a plastic tab labeled Deck, the handwriting trying to look neat and failing, and he turned it over in his fingers and put it in his shirt pocket to drop in a drawer until someone asked for it by name. By 3, he had done all he meant to do and locked up, testing the door twice and looking once more at the living room to make sure nothing of his was left. And he drove back to Houston in a heat that made the road shimmer. In his mailbox, there was a single plain envelope with no return address, and inside it, a glossy photo printed at a drugstore machine. The cabin deck at dusk with string lights glowing and a group of people cropped at the shoulders so only cups and hands showed. and on the back, in tidy block letters, "Family Night. Thanks, Uncle D." He carried the picture to the kitchen and set it under the fridge magnet, not as a keepsake, but as a record, something to point to if stories ever started to bend. The phone buzzed as he put the kettle on. Tyler again, then a long text from Lorna. "You are making a scene. Be an adult. Remove the deadline." And he let both sit. After dinner, he opened his laptop, checked the inspection confirmation, printed the buyer's proof of funds because having paper made him calm, then turned on two-factor alerts for every account he could, and wrote the backup codes on a small card he put with his driver's license. Near 8, a car rolled to a stop in front of the house. Engine idle low, and this time the driver got out, a woman in a sleeveless top he recognized a second later as Ava, the on-again girlfriend Tyler had brought to the cabin last spring. She stood on the walkway holding a brown envelope like a school project and looked at the doorbell camera and then down at her shoes. Derek stood in the hall out of view and did not move, counting to 60 and then 60 again. Finally, she placed the envelope on the doormat, got back in the car, and left without knocking. He waited until the taillights turned the corner, then opened the door and picked up the envelope, heavier than it looked, and inside he found copies of receipts he already had. Lawn service, propane, roof patch, each with his name at the top and a yellow sticky note on the last one. "I thought you might want these. I'm sorry. A." He set the papers on the table and sat with them, not angry, not pleased, only sure that truth had a way of leaking through even when people tried to keep it in their stories. He put the envelope with the cabin folder and poured tea and stood at the sink as the street went quiet. The phone hummed one last time at 9:43. "Tyler?" Then a short message. "Dad, don't sell it without talking to me." And he placed the phone face down and walked the rooms once, checked the back door latch, turned off the porch light he had fixed, and told himself the same sentence he had used to carry him through long maintenance nights, out loud in the empty kitchen where it sounded solid. Do the work, check it twice, and leave it clean. Wednesday came with a thin coolness in the air, the kind Houston gives you before the day remembers it is summer. And Derek moved through his kitchen with the same patient order he brought to every job. Thermos filled, tote checked, clipboard with the inspection schedule tucked under his arm. Then he locked the front door, tested the knob, and started the truck. The phone in his pocket began its familiar tremble almost at once. Tyler bright on the screen. Then a second later, another call stacked under it, and he let both roll to missed calls while the radio stayed off so he could hear the engine and the small rattle in the glove box where he had put the cabin deed copy and the cheap brass lock he had removed from the shed. The drive out felt shorter than Monday's, not because the miles had changed, but because his mind had one task. And when he turned into the gravel, the cabin looked like a man who had combed his hair and washed his face. Cleaner lines, no fuss, ready. He walked the rooms once, opened 2 windows for light, set his thermos on the counter, and was tightening the loose screw on the back door. Strike when a silver SUV rolled up, and a man in a polo with a clipboard stepped out. The inspector, polite and practical, the kind of person Derek liked working beside because they both trusted lists. They started in the crawl space, cool dirt and spider threads, then moved to the water heater, the breaker panel, the roof line, each item handled in a rhythm. Inspector called out an observation. Derek nodded, adjusted where he could, made a note where he couldn't. Twice the phone stirred his pocket, twice he ignored it. And once a text flashed when he set the phone on the windowsill to reach the panel. "Call me before you ruin it." With the same unknown number scribbled on the paper note from Tuesday, and he took a quiet breath and slid the phone face down again, because whatever that message wanted, it could not be part of the morning's work. At 10:30, Jared arrived, sleeves rolled, carrying a folder and a small smile, and he joined them for the last leg of the walkthrough. Listening, asking 1 or 2 sharp questions, then stepping back so the inspector could finish. The verdict was simple. A GFCI outlet in the kitchen that didn't trip fast enough, a downspout extension needed on the back corner where rain had cut a groove, and a hairline crack in a bathroom tile that did not matter to anyone but a camera. "Clean otherwise," the inspector said, writing fast. "I see care all over this place, and he tilted his head toward Derek as if to tip a hat. Jared caught Derek's eye and said, "We can credit the downspout $10 and change the outlet this afternoon if you like." And Derek said, "I've got a GFCI in my truck." Because of course he did, and he went to get it right then. 2 wires off, 2 wires on, press test and reset until the little light burned true. And by the time he was done, the silver SUV had pulled away and Jared was on the porch calling the buyer's agent with a tone that said both business and ease. That was when another car turned into the drive, too fast for the gravel. A black sedan. Derek recognized from the street outside his house, and his jaw tightened, not from anger, but from that old mechanic's instinct that told him when someone was about to use the wrong tool. Tyler got out first, sunglasses pushed up, face drawn thin in a way that made him look like a boy who hadn't slept, and Lorna followed, crisp in a white shirt in spite of the dust, her mouth already set. Derek stepped off the porch and met them in the open yard where sunlight showed everything honestly. No hallway shadows, no stage, because he preferred to keep conversations in places where people could not pretend later they had not said what they said. "You could answer a call," Tyler started, low and hard, and Derek replied in his even voice, "I said what needed saying in writing. I am not doing phone arguments." And he lifted his hand toward the porch where Jared stood now, quiet, a witness in case anyone forgot the shape of the morning. Lorna didn't look at Jared. She fixed on Derek like a singer finding her note and said, "This is beneath you, Derek. Selling the cabin without a family meeting? Disabling the account? Humiliating your son? People talk." And he said, "People talk when power is cut off. They can learn to flip their own switches." Which did not change her face, but made her blink once. Tyler shifted his weight like he wanted a different script and tried a softer line. "Dad, we can work something out. Just pause this. Don't sign anything. We can buy you out later." And Derek looked at his son's hands, at the way his fingers worried the seam of his pocket, and said, "There is nothing to pause. I made the promise to the bank and to myself to take care of this place while it was mine. I'm keeping that promise by letting it go clean. You are a man, Tyler. Make your own promises and keep them." Lorna took a step closer, perfume lifting in the warm air, and said in that careful voice designed for other ears, "Derek, you are not well. This is erratic." And he answered with a small nod, "I am well. What is new here is not my health. It is my boundary." And he held her eyes until she let hers slide past his shoulder to Jared, as if expecting an ally. But Jared only said, "The inspector is finished. We're within normal. We will proceed as Mr. Harper instructed," and then looked away, because lawyers avoid playing family. The whole exchange lasted less than 5 minutes, though it felt like one of those long Texas afternoons where the heat slows the clock. When it ended, Derek did the thing he had planned in case of this exact scene. He reached into his shirt pocket and brought out 2 envelopes he had prepared at home with certified mail copies of the notices, one addressed to Lorna, one to Tyler, and handed them across the space without stepping closer. "Paper," he said, "so we don't argue about memory later." And they took them because even angry hands know what to do with envelopes. Someone in the trees at the far end of the lot coughed, or maybe a branch shifted, and for a breath the old park sound of the place slid through, children long gone now, summers put away like folded blankets. Lorna smoothed the envelope against her palm and said, "You'll regret this," the sentence she used when she had run out of other ones. And Derek said, "I usually regret what I ignore, not what I finish." And then he turned, because there was nothing else to say that would not lead back into the same loop. And he walked up the steps, past Jared, and into the shade of the porch. He did not look back to see them leave, but he heard the path of their tires on the gravel and the click of the downshifting engine, and then the small quiet that returned. Not quite peace, not quite emptiness, something like a house after guests put their forks down and stand. Jared cleared his throat and said, almost gentle, "I'll email the addendum for the outlet. Inspection is a pass." And Derek said, "Good." And the word felt like a level laid on a board, bubble-centered. He locked the door, tested the knob, walked around once more to make sure all windows were latched for the last stretch. Then he and Jared drove off in separate cars. a small stagger between them, the way two men leave a job site when it's nearly done and each trusts the other to finish his part. On the road back, the phone scratched his pocket again. A quick ring that cut off. Then another. Then a text from an unknown number. You won't like what happens if you sell. And he took one hand off the wheel long enough to power the phone down because a dead thing cannot ring. At home, he set the envelope's carbon slips in the cabin folder. Dates, times, numbers. To keep the record straight, boiled water for tea, and replaced the porch bulb he had bought as a spare after seeing how the new one glowed too warm at dusk. Shadows came up the walls like slow water, and a car eased to a stop in front again and idled. And he stood behind the curtain where the lace broke the view and watched it for exactly the count of 60 and then 60 again until it rolled on without anyone stepping out. He ate soup and half a sandwich and read a few pages of the same library novel. And when his hand reached for the phone by habit to check any messages, he stopped it in the air and put it back down. The house ticked and breathed around him. Somewhere a dog gave one bark and then no more. Sleep came fast. And in the middle of the night, when the gray world of 3 a.m. tried to invite him into guesses, who wrote the notes, who left the lock, who would show up next? He gave those questions a small nod, like you give visitors you do not let in, and turned on his side and told himself, simple and firm, that he would handle only what had his name on it in ink. The phone on the counter stayed dark. When morning came, he woke easily, poured coffee, and marked a neat check next to inspection on the yellow pad, then looked at the next square, closing, and underlined it once as the day slid into gear. Closing week moved like a slow train you could see coming from far away, steady and loud enough to feel in the chest, and Derek marked each small step the way he always had with work. Print the closing statement. Jared emailed on Monday. Compare the numbers against the contract line by line. Sign where yellow flags told him to sign. Set a calendar reminder to confirm the wire details by phone with the title office because he did not trust links sent by anyone, even friendly ones. On Tuesday, he drove out to the cabin for the last time before papers, not to linger, but to finish the tiny tasks that let a place go without leaving slivers. Pull the 2 nails from behind the pantry door, wipe the refrigerator seal clean, sweep under the couch for a rogue bottle cap, set the thermostat to a polite neutral. Sunlight washed through the living room as if the house had tipped its face up to it, and he stood in that light for a moment with his hat in his hand, then turned and locked the door and tested the knob twice and slid the key on the ring marked cabin into a plain envelope he had brought to give Jared clean transfer. On the step, he found a fresh scuff where a shoe had caught the wood, and he buffed it with his thumb until the gray line softened. A useless gesture, maybe, but it felt like laying down a tool in the right place. The gravel popped under his tires as he left, and he didn't look in the mirror because he did not need goodbyes to be staged. He preferred them done. Back in Houston, an envelope waited under his doormat with no return address, and inside was a drugstore print of the deck strung with lights and paper cups on the rail, only arms and hands showing. And the back said in tidy block letters, "Family night. Thanks, Uncle D." He held the picture at the corner and added it to the fridge under a magnet shaped like a wrench. Not as keepsake, as record. Proof that stories have paper edges when people try to blur them. Wednesday afternoon, the black sedan idled in front of his house again, windows up, engine low, and he stood behind the living room lace curtain and counted to 60, and then 60 again before it slid away without a door opening. And the mystery of who sat inside stayed a shape without a face, like a tool outline on a pegboard waiting for the right socket. But he did not take the bait of curiosity. He only noted the date on a small card he kept near the phone labeled logs. Thursday morning, he dressed neat, the way he had for years when he walked into schools to fix things before the bell, and drove to the title office with the windows down and the radio off. A blue sky stretched over the freeway. Jared met him at the glass doors with a folder and a nod, and inside a woman with precise penmanship slid papers across a table that reflected the ceiling lights. Derek read each page, not skimming, not rushing, and where the page matched the promise he had made to himself, he signed, and where the woman spoke, he listened. And where Jared made a quiet joke to ease the air, Derek allowed himself the small smile he saved for work done right. When the last page was signed, the woman said, "That's it," and stood, and Jared shook his hand with both of his thumbs. The way men do when they mean it. A call came from the title office back room to say the wire had gone. And later, in his kitchen, Derek watched the bank app show the number land the way rain lands straight in a barrel, steady and sufficient. And he did a thing he had planned on paper days ago. He moved a clean portion to a new account titled Repairs and Quiet, and another portion to a savings bucket named Just Mine. And then he printed a one-page note to himself. No bailouts. No, just this once. No account names that mean family when they mean Derek. And tucked it behind his driver's license. He also slid a small, fair transfer to a separate account he had opened to square old joint purchases. Not to buy favor, not to soften edges, just to place the line cleanly and see it in numbers. And he wrote the memo field for himself alone. Settlement of what I owe myself. The phone buzzed 4 times between noon and 3. Tyler, then Lorna. Then Tyler again, then an unknown number that left a voicemail with no words, only road noise and a breath. He did not answer. He did not listen to the silence as if it wanted to argue. He let the missed call list stack the way dust stacks on a shelf you do not touch. Late afternoon, he took the small box labeled Return from the hall. The one with spare keys and a copy of the notice letters and 2 certified mail slips. And he drove 2 quiet loops. First to May's little brick place, where he slid her spare cabin key and his printed notice through the slot with the carbon copy of the certified letter stapled behind it. Then to Lorna's condo, where he rang the buzzer and when nobody answered, left her key in a sealed envelope at the desk with a note for the attendant. For L. Harper, return key receipt requested. And he asked the man to sign the duplicate slip, and the man did with a shrug that said he had handed over stranger things. On the way home, Derek bought a new porch latch because the one he installed last week clicked a little too soft for his ear. And he bought a packet of herb seeds on a whim, basil and mint, because he liked the idea of green. He could tend that no one would ask to borrow. The wire confirmation hit the bank just before 5, and he filed the PDF in a folder called Closing. And beneath it, he slid the photo Ava had left and the note with the number that had threatened him. You won't like what happens if you sell, because even ugly things deserve a place in the record if they touch your life. Twilight brought a softness to the house he had not felt in years. A quiet, not hollow, but full of possibility. And in it he cooked beans and rice with a generous pinch of cumin and chopped an onion calmly until the pieces were even and the pan smelled like his own kitchen should. The phone trembled again. Tyler. And then, after a pause, a text rolled in. Dad, I'm coming over. And Derek set the phone on the windowsill face down and washed the cutting board, and then took a slow walk around his little yard, looking at the fence line, noticing where a vine had started to thread itself up the slats, noticing the way the new porch bulb threw a circle on the step like a small stage with no actor. The black sedan came one last time just after dark and idled, and he turned off his porch light and stood where he could see without being seen. And after 100 heartbeats, it rolled on, and he pictured a person in that car practicing lines they would not say out loud. And he did not follow the scene any farther in his head. At 9, Jared called to say, funds received, deed recorded, all done. And Derek said, thank you, and then added, because it mattered to say it once, you did good work. And Jared said it back. He sat down with his yellow pad and wrote a neat check mark beside closing, then drew a line under the 3 words that had carried him from the moment of the mimosa to now: account, cabin, lawyer. And he wrote one more word he had been saving: quiet, and underlined it once. Near 10, a soft knock touched the front door, not hard, not demanding. 2 taps that suggested a person not sure of their standing. And Derek stood behind the door and said, who is it? And a voice that could have been Tyler's or could have been the night said nothing. And after a long blink, the footsteps turned away, and he let them go. He made tea and took it to the back step and sat where the warm air folded around him, and the yard smelled like wet soil and crepe myrtle, and he thought about mysteries. How some want solving and some want naming, and some, like the sedan, lose their power when you do not feed them. and he decided the only mystery he owed his life was the one that asked, "What do you do with your days when nobody else is steering them?" He would fix the gate tomorrow, plant the herbs on Saturday, go to the library next week and ask the lady at the desk about the woodworking books she had mentioned. Maybe drive out to a flea market and buy a vise for the workbench he kept too tidy. When the phone buzzed one last time on the counter, a call that lived the same life and died the same death as the others, he let it because the sound did not stick to him anymore. It just moved through the room and out the open window like a moth. And he smiled as if at a private joke and set his cup down and turned off the porch light and locked the back door and stood a minute with his palm on the wood just to feel the latch catch, then walked down the hall in the dark toward a bed that had the cool side waiting. He never picked up, not out of spite, not out of pride, but because he had finally learned the cleanest work sometimes is the work you refuse to do. And because his silence carried right, said everything that needed saying.